Today we will have the speakers as follows, who will tell us about the experience. There will be Figel, director of the Polish Institute in Kyiv, Minister Counsellor of the Embassy of Poland in Ukraine. Also, Dr. Iago Aguado, Deputy Head of Mission of the Embassy of Spain in Ukraine. And Kateryna Smagliy, who is Associate Professor at Kyiv National University of Culture and Arts, and the member of Museum Council, and the National Correspondent of Museum Funds, and also Director of Kyiv Office of Canon Institute. We have such a honored guests today, and we have agenda. We all know that you will have 15 minutes each, and please speak slowly because we have simultaneous interpretation. And short introductory word from me. We are talking today about global and Ukrainian experience, and I just want to remind you about one Ukrainian experience of 19th century when museums just started being organized in Ukraine, and that time private and civil initiatives were very important, and the history itself, even the history of creation of one museum, National History Museum, National Decorative Arts Museum, comes from private initiatives of the middle of 70s years, and that idea that the Kyiv was developed as a commercial active city, and about 60% of people at that time were not literate, and that idea about museum were born in Gramotnist community for 20 years approximately, in university passages between professors, and then 20 years more this idea was wandering on the offices of the officials who wanted to prohibit that because they feared a lot. If there is a museum in Kyiv, it will be the fear of separatism for the authorities of Russian Empire, because it was Russian Empire at that time. And only in 1894 they decided that if we can't prohibit it, we need to chair it, and in this way the museum was organized in Kyiv. There were few meetings, few letters were sent, and in 3 years after such an organization was organized, after the country gave that idea to the hands of other people, in 2 years the collection was gathered, the funds were found for the building. I can say, in contemporary words, crowdfunding was made. Of some people, Astereshenko gave 200,000, some people gave just 2 karbovanets, but still civil societies initiated the museums, and they became the management bodies of the museum till 1917. Why I'm telling you about 1917? Because that time the person who chaired that activities died, and he couldn't continue it. Of course, this history wasn't that smooth because there were relationships between different institutions and museums. These relationships were very different. But that museum appeared not because the authorities decided to have it. It appeared from the conflict, from the dialogue of those who were interested. There were civil organizations, there were advanced people of the centuries, there were merchants and other people who wanted to make the city more prestigious. That beginning shows how private initiative influenced into this process of creation of museums for everybody. And now I would like to give the floor to Kateryna Smagliy. She will be the first. The floor is yours, Kateryna.
First of all, I would like to express much thanks to the organizers of this conference. This is just not the words for the protocol. The first speaker always starts with the gratitude, words of a message of gratitude. I believe that this is a very important function, which is going to be supported by the international donors and the other international institutions, because we not only have to work on the humanitarian policy of Ukraine, which is impossible without development of the humanitarian policy of the specific region. You gave a very interesting historical example, the creation of the first public museum with the assistance the American concentration camps families, and there are other examples of establishing such museums, which almost were completely destroyed. My favorite example, the museum created with the assistance of the first American President George Washington and the small settlement of Elberton, which is now completely managed by the local public, which operates on the basis of the local donations on the private initiative through the announcement published in the newspaper, and they actually restored this museum from the scratch. After the first panel discussion, which we witnessed here and we were part of, the issue that our authorities do not completely understand the problems associated with the premises to be allocated, allotted for the museums, the problems which could be faced by the museum experts or employees, how we can create the museums so following the initiatives of the local communities in the way they visualize the development of the area and community. Our discussion is dedicated to the creative rebuilding of the industrial areas and the successful stories, the examples of other countries. In fact, this discussion has been in place in Ukraine for many years now. This is not the first discussion. I remember in 2012 in Donetsk, we participated in a conference organized by the Lyubov Mikhailova, the founder and the person who became the owner of the Isolation Foundation, the Cultural Center Isolation, which unfortunately today finds itself, is located on the temporarily occupied territory, but the isolation proper has been moved to Kyiv and successfully operates now. In the conference, which was dedicated to this issue, we had three international experts. First of all, director of the Museum of Ukraine in Germany, based on the coal mines in the rural province, learned when they wanted to move the whole coal industry and purchase coal from China was cheaper for the German economy. Almost 300,000 persons who had worked in this area, they lost their jobs. And so in those mines, they were used as a basis for the museum, which today is part of the UNESCO International Heritage. This is also not only a museum, but also a platform for some creative ideas, which was mentioned by my colleague Murchak during the first panel. So the economic prospects of this area in Germany is at a much higher level. Tanya Hekto also informed us about diverse architectural projects in Europe based on the dilapidated or abandoned establishments and institutions. This is a very interesting example, which is started by the Trans-Europe Halls organizations, which today unites 50 different museum institutions and other multicultural, multidiscipline institutions, which use the post-industrial facilities, and they are involved in the development of culture. I understand that our foreign experts who are going to follow my speech, we are going to share with you a wonderful example of post-industrial projects. Bilbao, I understand you're going to talk about that today. Wonderful examples in Poland in Lodz, but the specifics of the area we're talking about is lack of the resolution of the safety or security situation. We know that the Minsk agreements do not really work, and the representatives of the Lugansk administration mentioned that they are today at the boundary of security and safety. We do not know what would be the destiny of the exhibits or displays over there. So the situation is not clear, remains to be unclear, and we can actually study those wonderful examples, but unfortunately they would be of no, or at least not much, let's say, weight for the history or historical culture of Ukraine. And that's why the first discussion we had demonstrated the importance of discussion of our history and understanding what we should start with. We're talking about those exhibitions and displays, what they have to be based upon. I would like to give you a very good example of post-industrial conversion, but not based on the industrial facilities, but based on the rural clubs of culture, the countryside clubs of culture, which could become the sites and platforms for new museum institutions or establishments. When I worked in 2009, 2012 with the foundation, there was an anti-crisis humanitarian program aimed at the restoration of the dilapidated or abandoned rural clubs all over Ukraine. They supported many rural or village clubs in the Donetsk region as well, and we made use of very wonderful experience from the Czech Republic, Per Bedner, who became the winner of the International Association Ashoka Prize, who supported the industrial donors all over the world. They have a very good, very similar history in the Czech Sudets when this area became part of the Czech Republic. They organized international cultural festivals for those people in that specific region and the territories in Sudets. We are talking about representatives from Germany, the Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, etc. He organized very interesting bus tours, which must include obligatorily representatives of the German nation or Czech nation. So during those bus tours, the people could actually discuss their problems and try to heal the historical wounds they had. And the national policies, Václav Galler, person who went to those villages where this project Peter Bergman worked, and owing to his political influence, and he actually promoted and he contributed to coming of many people, children choir, etc., etc. Tourists from all over Europe start to come there, and as a result, this kind of the abandoned and God-forsaken rural areas start to be restored. If we start to talk about the humanitarian strategy, humanitarian policy of the Donetsk region, we have to start with very simple step-by-step initiatives on the part of the NGOs or public organizations. And crowning my very short presentation, I would like to thank once again to the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, who invited us here, to the leader of this wonderful initiative, Leonid Maruchak, for the fact that at last we are forming the cultural dialogue with the Donbass area, and gradually those museum establishments, cultural institutions will come up with the displays and the exhibitions which would be interested not only to the local population, but the whole population of Ukraine. In all the Ukraine, all the citizens of Ukraine must visit those museums and take interest in their historical and cultural exhibits and life. Thank you. Thank you, Kateryna. And now I'd like to propose all of you, all of us, to hear what Eva Figel would like to say to us. Thank you very much, dear ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to say more about the example of one of the industrial cities, which was associated with the textile industry. Lodz, actually the city which appeared at the turn of the 19th and 20th century. That was kind of typical industrial city, and here I can see more modern picture how it looks today after the process of revitalization, when the municipality and the local authority started in 2014. There are drastic changes and the transformation in architecture within a very short period of time. And that was in the end of the 20th century, in Poland we had a huge economic and also social crisis. They started the process not only of the let's say abandonment, or let's say of the abandonment of the architecture. There are many of old buildings. They also faced the problem associated with unemployment, which also impacted the infrastructure of the city, but as well the environment or the atmosphere in this city. Then the municipality of this city put themselves a question: what has to be done? How they can find a way out of this critical situation or crisis situation? And they planned for themselves a small program for the local revitalization of the houses and some of the quarters of the city, the blocks of the city. It started with the 12 of those, but this was the objective of this program was to find out what has to be done. So the first program was associated how to change the brick houses where the people reside, and they started this process of revitalization. They started to take care of 170 houses. Somebody would say the small number, but I believe that we have to start with something, And now these pictures and these photos that we can see, you can see the let's say the houses and the buildings after revitalization. You can see how drastically and dramatically they changed, how they actually impact the whole vision or the image of the city. Later you'll hear the small presentation. I would like to apologize that this presentation hasn't been translated into Ukrainian. It's in Polish language. So briefly, what this presentation is all about. The first question was, what is the revitalization process is all about? What we have to start with. So the local authorities of this city, authorities gave a very short answer. This is the process of bringing the city back to life. It's not associated with the overhaul or the repair of the building or infrastructure, but first of all, we were talking about the creation of new public spaces where the people could feel better, where the people themselves would become responsible for what they would like to change in their own blocks of buildings, or then generally in the whole city. Also, you'll hear the speech of the president, the mayor of the city, and the chief architect of the city, who drew the local people attention that the local society must be involved in this kind of revitalization process, and they have to talk together in order to find such an approach which would be interesting to all the residents of the city, not only to the local government or the local authorities. And then in this presentation, you'll see that those factories and those enterprises, they were kind of rejuvenated, so to say. They acquired a new life, and they start with architecture, and they start then to answer the question how to invite new industry and how to develop creative industry. And the very clear answer was given to this question on the part of the local governance bodies, that this must be done together with the citizens, the residents of the city, because they know better than anybody else what city they would like to live in, how they would like to transform their city, etc., etc. Also, you can see that the area of the North City has increased five times. The city population increased twofold, and the crisis which started in 1990s, when the industry, there was a big decline in the volume industry and textile industry, among other industries. More than 1,000 ruined buildings we had to do something about that, and we had to find very quickly the answer to the question how we were going to do that. We start the revitalization process, as I mentioned before. We start with the individual houses and buildings, and then we also invited the local residents to this process, and we covered one block after another one, and trying to find the answer to the question what and how we are going to change. And we had a very big help, financial assistance from the European Union. I just must tell you that the city of Lodz received 40,000 euros for the revitalization of those 12 micro boroughs or micro districts of the city. Also, we had to think about the social program. We set up the center of the education. Also, we start to issue the free newspaper, which would inform the local residents with the initiatives what they plan to do in the city, and the people themselves could actually send in their contribute to this newspaper and explain their vision of the development of this city. Then we took the second step, which we called the stage, or the creating the brick city, and also it included what we wanted to add to the architectural changes. Also, we created kind of some rooms or the blocks for this, the quarters for the students, or rather non-expensive ones, because you have to understand that this is the city with a lot of not only Polish students, but also we have very well developed the cinematographic society there. And we start the second part of the revitalization, which is going to be completed, has to be completed in 2020, which has to cover 1,200 administrative buildings, while also 2,500 buildings which are in the private ownership, and which are also partly supported by our state. And the city received 1 billion euros from foreign investors. But those are in addition to that, there are also small investments which have to help to the renovation and restoration of the residential buildings and some creative industry. Also, we are talking about the creation of the local clubs, or the places where people can gather together, which will be turned into some kind of centers of culture and some kind of cultural space for the local residents. And then in a minute you'll see that presentation. It also contains examples of the specific changes. They mention the Prince watermill, about the block where there was more than 100 residents live today, and how they managed to increase the level of standards of living of local people. Also, for this purpose, they received 50,000 euros. Also, there is another block which is called part of the city district, which is manufacture. It's called manufacture. This also the recreational and cultural part of the city, and they it creates 3,000 jobs for the local people, which is very important because people found new jobs after this big decline in our economy. Also, they found new opportunities. I'm talking about the tourism. Tourism is associated with turning the former enterprise of factories into new hotels. I'm talking first of all about the tobacco and these hotels, which in the past were just huge factories, and now they has been transformed or turned into hotels. The elements also of the modern artistic galleries. Another district which is called in Lodz NS2. This is the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, which is a former factory, by the way, and the huge textile factories, which we turned into art incubators. which today in different galleries and small-scale museums and conference halls, they created the jobs for 7,000 people. Also, we created a new educational center. I believe that now, if we could put on the screen this presentation, you will see there also the center, which is called C1. This is former the CHPP plant, combined heat power plant. Now it's a huge cultural center. Once again, I apologize that this presentation, this video is in Polish language. I believe that some of you will understand that. But anyway, I'll try to convey the major message contained in this video.
Przemysłowych.
Łódź jest typowym miastem poprzemysłowym. Powstała na przełomie XIX i XX wieku z marzeń ówczesnych fabrykantów. Koniec XX wieku to upadek przemysłu i olbrzymie problemy społeczne i gospodarcze miasta. Dlatego podjęliśmy decyzję o rewitalizacji.
Rewitalizacja to jest proces przywracania życia miasta historycznego, które zaczęło źle funkcjonować. W samym tym określeniu, że jest to przywracanie życia, zawiera się cały sens tej operacji. Remontowanie budynków, tworzenie nowych przestrzeni publicznych, nowych placów, nowych ulic, nowych parków służy temu, żeby mieszkańcom miasta żyło się lepiej, bardziej nowocześnie i bardziej współcześnie. Trzeba ten proces przeprowadzać przy udziale mieszkańców. Oni muszą być bardzo ważnym składnikiem tworzenia się, można powiedzieć, miasta na nowo.
Te działania, które realizujemy, przede wszystkim służyć mają ludziom, którzy w miastach mieszkają, którzy chcą w miastach rozwijać swoje zainteresowania, budować kariery, tworzyć rodziny. Obiekty pofabryczne, które lata swojej świetności mają już za sobą, obecnie dzięki właśnie działaniom rewitalizacyjnym przeżywają swoją drugą młodość. Są wykorzystywane na zupełnie inne funkcje. To rozwijają się tutaj nowoczesne przemysły kreatywne i tego typu obiekty obecnie dzięki właśnie działaniom rewitalizacyjnym pracują na rzecz mieszkańców. Rewitalizacja prowadzona właściwie to rewitalizacja prowadzona w partnerstwie, w szerokiej współpracy zarówno z mieszkańcami, jak i ze wszystkimi podmiotami, które w mieście funkcjonują.
Powierzchnia Łodzi w ciągu ostatnich 100 lat zwiększyła się 5-krotnie. Liczba mieszkańców Łodzi od początku XX wieku wzrosła ponad 2-krotnie. W roku 1990 przyszedł kryzys, do którego doprowadziło załamanie rynku wschodniego, wzrost konkurencyjnego importu, koniec centralnie planowanej gospodarki oraz nowe warunki rynkowe. Przemysł stopniowo upadał, a miasto w spadku po nich dostało tysiące niszczejących budynków, kamienic, pałaców, willi i fabryk. Łódź jako jedno z pierwszych miast w Polsce przyjmuje lokalny program rewitalizacji. Rewitalizacja obszarowa w Łodzi obejmuje przestrzeń, ludzi i ekonomię. Budżet projektu pilotażowego, którego efektem było opracowanie modelu prowadzenia rewitalizacji, wyniósł 1 000 000 euro. Za tę kwotę przeprowadzono konsultacje dotyczące 12 obszarów rewitalizacji, zinwentaryzowano oraz stworzono ekspertyzy dla 35 kamienic. Zrealizowano program edukacyjny oraz przeznaczono 40 000 euro na wsparcie mikrodziałań. Uruchomiono centrum konsultacyjne, zorganizowano 281 minifestynów i wydano bezpłatną gazetę. W ramach projektu Miasto Kamienic remontem zostało objętych 170 historycznych budynków. Cały projekt miał budżet wielkości 50 milionów euro. W wyremontowanych kamienicach powstały m.in. tanie mieszkania dla studentów. Projekt rewitalizacji na lata 2014-2020 zakłada inwestycje w 20 obszarach, na terenie których znajduje się prawie 1500 budynków gminnych oraz blisko 2500 budynków prywatnych, w których mieszka ponad 50 000 osób. Na rewitalizację zdobyto 1 miliard euro dofinansowania, które zostaną przeznaczone m.in. na inwestycje na ponad 40 ulicach, placach i parkach, dzięki którym powstaną nowe drogi wewnątrz kwartałów, centra obywatelskie, nowoczesne małe domy dziecka, świetlice środowiskowe, siedziby instytucji kultury oraz ośrodek reintegracji. Łódzka rewitalizacja jest jedną z największych w Europie. Łódzkie domy familijne to dawne domy dla pracowników fabryk. To ponad 1000 mieszkań, których standard znacznie odbiegał od potrzeb współczesnych mieszkańców. W procesie rewitalizacji zostaje podniesiona jakość przestrzeni mieszkalnych. Działanie zostało poprzedzone konsultacjami z mieszkańcami, a często także indywidualnymi rozmowami z lokatorami. W ramach programu Miasto Kamienic remontem zostało objętych 170 budynków położonych głównie w centralnej Łodzi. Łączny budżet projektu wyniósł równowartość 50 milionów euro. Dla wielu budynków był to pierwszy generalny remont od czasów powstania w XIX czy na początku XX wieku. Większość kamienic odnawianych jest całościowo. Ważnym elementem prac jest zagospodarowanie podwórza, stworzenie w nich przestrzeni zielonych dla podwyższenia komfortu życia w mieście. Fabryka należąca niegdyś do łódzkiego potentata włókienniczego, Izraela Poznańskiego, po rewitalizacji zmieniła się w największe w Polsce centrum handlu, rozrywki i kultury. Przywrócone do świetności pofabryczne budynki mieszczą sklepy, restauracje, biura, kino i muzea. Rewitalizacja zwróciła tę przestrzeń mieszkańcom Łodzi i zapewniła pracę prawie 3000 osób. Pofabryczne budynki świetnie służą także rozwojowi turystyki. 2 z kilkudziesięciu łódzkich hoteli stanowią szczególnie spektakularny przykład rewitalizacji. Hotel Tobacco najpierw był fabryką chustek, potem fabryką papierosów. W nowej odsłonie zachwyca industrialną surowością wnętrz i wysmakowanymi detalami przypominającymi o dawnych funkcjach. Zrewitalizowany obiekt zdobył nagrodę European Property Awards w kategorii Best Hotel Interior Europe. 4-gwiazdkowy Andels Hotel mieści się w tym samym pofabrycznym kompleksie co manufaktura. Rewitalizacja obiektu została wykonana tak, aby jego dawne funkcje maksymalnie wykorzystać w nowej rzeczywistości. Oszklony basen został stworzony w XIX-wiecznym zbiorniku przeciwpożarowym. Większość z 277 pokoi przypomina o industrialnej przeszłości budynku. Hotel posiada też bogatą kolekcję 130 prac polskich artystów współczesnych. W procesie rewitalizacji Łodzi niebagatelną rolę odgrywa wykorzystanie poprzemysłowej spuścizny w rozwoju kultury. MS2 to wiodące muzeum sztuki współczesnej w Polsce, słynące ze spektakularnych wystaw. MS2 posiada także jedną z najbogatszych kolekcji sztuki XX wieku w kraju. Może ją pokazywać dzięki nowej siedzibie w budynkach dawnej fabryki. Przedsiębiorstwo Karola Scheiblera było największym spośród funkcjonujących w Królestwie Polskim zakładów włókienniczych. Łączna powierzchnia fabryki zajmowała 500 hektarów, co stanowiło w XIX wieku aż 14% powierzchni Łodzi. Część dawnych zakładów Scheiblera przekształcono w 2014 roku w Art Inkubator. W 3 budynkach na powierzchni 7000 m2 znajdują się pracownie, przestrzenie wystawiennicze, sala koncertowo-teatralna, galerie, przestrzenie biurowe i konferencyjne. I tak dawna przemysłowa przestrzeń została przekształcona w fabrykę dla sztuki i przemysłów kreatywnych. Nowe centrum Łodzi to projekt bez precedensu. 100-hektarowy kwartał centrum miasta ma zostać przywrócony mieszkańcom i wpisany w kontekst zabytkowego śródmieścia. Nowe centrum Łodzi łączy w sobie wszystkie najważniejsze elementy rewitalizacji. Ma służyć mieszkańcom, ale też ściągać do miasta wielki biznes i rozwijać kulturę. Nowy dworzec Łódź Fabryczna, który zostanie ukończony w 2016 roku, pozwala na odprawienie aż 200 000 pasażerów dziennie. To 20 razy więcej niż umożliwiał stary dworzec. Stacja kolejowa znajdzie się ponad 16 metrów pod ziemią. Nowoczesny dworzec stanie się częścią multimodalnego węzła komunikacyjnego, który w centrum miasta połączy kolej aglomeracyjną i konwencjonalną, autobusową komunikację dalekobieżną, komunikację miejską oraz prywatny transport samochodowy. EC1 to pierwsza w Łodzi elektrownia, mająca w założeniu służyć całemu miastu. Powstała w 1907 roku i funkcjonowała przez niemal 100 lat. W 2008 roku rozpoczął się proces przekształcania dawnej elektrowni w multidyscyplinarne Centrum Kultury i Wiedzy. Na powierzchni 28 630 m2 powstają m.in. Centrum Nauki i Techniki, kino sferyczne 3D, planetarium, przestrzenie warsztatowe, galeria, teatr dźwięku oraz sale seminaryjno-konferencyjne. Inwestycja kosztuje 65 milionów euro. Kolejnym elementem nowego centrum Łodzi są przestrzenie pod zabudowę komercyjną. Pierwszą z inwestycji będzie budowa bramy miasta, budynku biurowego dla 3500 pracowników, który stanie się zarazem symbolem Nowej Łodzi. Nie tylko Łódź, ale także wiele innych obszarów w Polsce jest objętych działaniami rewitalizacyjnymi. Proces ten trwa od ponad dekady. W latach 2004-2006 realizowano lokalne programy rewitalizacji, w ramach których za kwotę 96,5 miliona euro wdrożono 178 projektów rewitalizacyjnych na terenie 113 miast oraz 9 gmin wiejskich. Do 2020 roku zostanie przeprowadzony kolejny etap działań rewitalizacyjnych. Środki krajowe i europejskie zostaną przeznaczone na rozwój technologii informacyjno-komunikacyjnych, gospodarkę niskoemisyjną, środowisko i kulturę, inwestycje w sferę transportu, rozwój rynku pracy i przedsiębiorczości, włączenie społeczne, w tym dostęp do usług publicznych oraz edukacja.
Przedstawiliśmy Państwu historię i wizję rozwoju naszego miasta. Pytanie, co dalej? Czas na ich realizację. Już teraz jesteśmy liderem rewitalizacji wśród miast w Polsce. Teraz chcemy pokazać się światu. Zapraszamy do Łodzi.
Дякую. Там на кінці була теж коротка інформація, що це
And then there was a short information that this revitalization process started in other cities as well. But in Lodz it was initiated, all this positive change, and I hope it is a good example of how it's possible to change environment if the official bodies finds the specific program involving the citizens of the city. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask you one more small question. We discussed a lot already about museums already, but as for me, revitalization can be not concerning the city, but also it can be revitalization of citizens themselves. I know that museum had very active teaching program, because from the very beginning this contemporary art museum was not perceived in a good way by the citizens. Maybe you can tell us about your work with people, with children. You know, the main problem in Lodz that happened after the crisis in 90s, it was social crisis first of all. A lot of people lost work, a lot of people had problems in social and cultural life. In other galleries, There were specific educational programs, the programs not only for kids, but also for the citizens of the cities, to let them understand, first of all, how it's possible to change their own attitudes to the transformation started. And we can imagine also that this transformation for the most of people who survived very long, complicated situations. Because it wasn't complicated just economic, but first of all, there was a problem for people to understand why it is so complicated. Because new authorities, new oppositions, they said that now everything will be fine. And also it was very traditional city with traditional history. But now, due to these revitalization processes, due to the activities of the centers of cultures and galleries, broke old-fashioned stereotypes of the population of the city to more modern way and attitude, and they gave them confidence it was possible to cope with this crisis and to create something new. I think here we could feel that this gallery is this small culture center gave new possibilities to find the employment. It was very important for people to understand that touristic sphere, art sphere is very important for the city and for themselves, because they can find possibilities for themselves to work there. And in the same way, they started changing their attitude to the contemporary arts. Still it's not easy for them, because I understand but many people didn't understand it due to their traditional values, and we needed to spend a lot of efforts from the side of museum, from the side of arts, from the side of workers in art sphere in Poland to make this program, how to change mentality, how to make transformation in people's head, to let them understand it's important. And what is going on in the city is important for themselves and for people. And now I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Iago Aguado.
Thank you very much, Yuliya. Thank you, Eva, for your very interesting presentation on the case study of Lodz, which I'm sure is a very good example also because you come from a similar history to Ukraine, which is close. But we at the Embassy of Spain were very flattered when we were approached by the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center to participate in this presentation or chat on the way museums can help to revitalize cities and our experience. I think Spain has been particularly successful in this field, which provides an intersection of, you want, of culture, tourism, economy, and revitalization of cities. A field where we are one of the leading players in the world. So I think there are a couple of statistics which are useful to show where we are coming from. Spain is the third country in the world in terms of international tourism. Last year we had 68 million foreigners visiting Spain. It's the third after France and the United States, which is a significant fact. It's also growing very strongly in recent years. It provides 11% of our GDP, and it's 124 billion euros a year. I mean, you're talking of figures which are very significant, bigger than most other countries' GDPs as a total. And it's also very important from our perspective to bring people from abroad, not only to share what we have to offer, but also from the economic point of view, because it's really what permits us to finance a great part of our economy. And also within this field, the importance we've managed to extract of culture from an economic point of view, which I also think is an important lesson which Spain can provide for Ukraine. In Spain now, culturally linked industries provide about 3% of GDP, which is about 500,000 jobs. So that's, you know, very good, high-value jobs, high job satisfaction, and this is something we've managed to develop very successfully. And I think Ukraine can replicate in some cases. So I'd like to present a couple of examples of what we've done. Our very big successes. Also, I think it's useful to share the experience of some of our mistakes, because you know, it's speaking between friends. It's also good for you to learn of cases where we've invested a lot of money and the return has not been as good. When you set out to think for a strategy for Ukraine, how you can use culture, tourism to help the development of the country, you know, to direct your investment in the right direction. As Kateryna mentioned before, we were asked to talk about the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, which is really a pioneering project in the 90s in this sort of reconversion of industrial areas in the city of Bilbao. Bilbao is the main city in the Basque region, about 700,000 inhabitants, with a very strong industrial tradition, and which in the 80s and 90s had to go through a very big industrial, what we call reconversion program, as we went from heavy industries to more high value added industrial sectors. It's still a very industrial city, but I imagine if you're talking, for instance, about Donbass, the future of Donbass is not to leave industry, but to adapt to modern industry, leave some non-competitive heavy industries and move into high-tech industries, which they have done very successfully. With the problem, obviously, of what you do with the brownfield sites, which are the formerly industrial sites, often in the center of cities. In the case of Bilbao, especially the harbor area, which is where the Guggenheim is now. What you do with these areas, how you reincorporate them into the cities. And that was the idea between the Guggenheim Museum, which is based in what were formerly docks of the city. Initially, the plan was to convert the docks and to conserve them, but in the end, the choice was made not to use the existing buildings, but to build something completely new. Then I'll show some examples where we've done the opposite. So a number of points which were very important in achieving success in a place like Guggenheim. First is the impressive architecture. Okay, I think it's very important to keep in mind that this is a very competitive field. All cities in Europe want to reconvert themselves. They all want to bring tourists. They all, you know, we're all aspiring to the same things, and so you have to set out from a position where you can offer something special and different, which is where in some cases, we've also had cases where we didn't manage to do that. And so here it's a project which has, you know, top architecture. Is a result of international competition, which is something which we have used quite frequently in Spain to get top architects to get branding for a project. In this case, it was the Canadian Frank Gehry. Alternative buildings. Now you see the image and you think people have got used to this, but 25 years ago, this was really revolutionary. A deconstructivist architecture, the use of titanium, you know, buildings, deconstructed buildings. Which is an important thing, and in the Guggenheim case is one of the reasons for its success. But I think there's another important lesson we have in the Guggenheim case, which is important, and I think particularly important in Ukraine from my experience of visiting Ukrainian museums, and it's that they got from the very beginning the idea of the content right. See, you have to provide the infrastructure, an attractive building, but you also need to know what you're going to do with the building. And that reminds me of a case in a previous posting I had when I was posted in Vilnius, where they decided to rebuild the old royal or princely palace, but they didn't know what they were going to do with it. So they started rebuilding it, and then they decided what to do with it. And I think that's probably not the correct approach. And in the Guggenheim case, it's very close. They decided to find a project, they decided to find a partner, in this case, the Guggenheim Foundation in New York, which would help them provide content, you know, because it's a lot of itinerary expositions, so they could really get top quality content on a regular basis. And the result of that is over 1 million tourists, over 1 million visitors a year. And they've managed to keep this up since 1997. Which is fairly good going. But when I was thinking about how to present it, I was looking for pictures of before and after. Yes, the picture's not too good, but you can see the Guggenheim Museum, and you can see what they've managed to do, which is convert the whole area of the city. It's not just building a museum and then leaving it. It's a comprehensive project where you get private investment. That's another very important thing. I think it's the projects which have been most successful in Spain have been the ones which have had obviously a cultural element, but also a market approach, where you think, well, we're going to build a museum, we have to fill it with people, and how we can use this whole project to get in private partners which will help finance it. No? And then what you manage to get is the typical development of offices, residential areas, parks, social facilities, all in one, which is I think very successful in Bilbao. Many of you will know Barcelona. Every Ukrainian I know has been to Barcelona, and you all know Barcelona as a city open to the sea with its beaches and everything. But 30 years ago, Barcelona was separated from the sea by a massive industrial zone, which reminds me sometimes of Odessa. You know, you have a highway between the city and the sea. And in Barcelona, using the Olympics, they managed to transform that. So the Olympics were used as really a real estate operation too, with private partners. As I was saying, we have a number of projects which have been set out in that same sort of approach of grand urban planning, incorporating the museums into much bigger plans. One of the most noteworthy is the City of the Arts and Sciences in Valencia. Here again, you have a big city. It's 1 million inhabitants. You have a very potent tourist industry, and what you do is you provide value added. In this case, it's a whole network of cultural facilities, scientific facilities, which were built under the direction of one of the world's leading architects, Santiago Calatrava again, good name, to attract people, and then a whole set of cultural institutions. And here again, you can see the approach with a before and after picture. This was Valencia, because this was built on the river banks of the Turia, which is the river which crosses Valencia, which is normally very, very small, and then now and then floods, which is why the river banks were so big. So the river was diverted, and the result now is massive cultural infrastructure, improvement of the social conditions of the citizens, building of new also residential areas, which has helped finance this, helped the city finance, attract people, and once again, you have that sort of approach. Perhaps a more modest case, but which has also been successful, has been the municipal slaughterhouse in Madrid, which was a big industrial area from the beginning of the century, 67 buildings beside the Manzanares, which is the river of Madrid, but which had become completely obsolete by the early 90s and was abandoned. And so once again, here we have the idea of incorporating a transformation of an industrial site into cultural use, which is incorporated in this case, again, a hub with design centers, theaters, library, cinemas, but incorporated into a more general project of urban renewal in a whole area of Madrid. In this case, the Madrid River area, it's called now, which has been completely Madrid was like Barcelona. It was a city which turned its back on the sea. Madrid was a city which turned its back on the river. And this cooperation between the private sector, the cultural sector, and the public authorities has managed to turn it around fairly successfully. As I said, the key points which I think we can transmit would be that you need a holistic approach. It's a mistake, and political authorities have a temptation to that, especially if they have EU money, we have some money, let's build a museum, yes? And you don't think about what you're going to put in the museum, where you're putting the museum, whether there's infrastructure to bring people to see the museum. So that would be my first warning to to our Ukrainian friends. You know, you can be very successful, but you have to think it through very carefully. Once again, the question of contents. You know, it's not just about building a museum, it's about having attractive things in the museum so people want to go. And I mean, you have the case of the Guggenheim Museum, which is a modern art center. And even they, you know, they're bringing 1 million people a year, but they've had to diversify. And for instance, now they're also moving into more traditional sort of exhibitions of classic art. So that's something you have to keep in head. Another thing you really need to consider, which is very important, would be the whole idea of public-private partnerships, you know, where you have the authorities working together with private developers. We've had many cases in the past. I mean, for instance, the Olympics in 1992 was a classic example. The Olympic City was built to house the athletes, but with clearly a commercial idea behind it. And the flats were sold, and it was actually a very, from an economic point of view, as opposed to many other Olympics, was very profitable. Not only in terms of the development of the city and future, but in itself. And so these things are possible, and that would be my recommendation, you know, to study that, and to avoid this famous white elephants, no projects which big investments in the wrong place, the wrong thing, and then all you have is an empty building. And we've had a number of cases like that. There's a famous case. We have something called the Centros de Interpretación, which are interpretation centers, which are small museums which are built in many provincial towns or in areas, a wine growing area, and so they decide we're going to build the museum of wine, and they build a small museum. But if they don't get their content right, if they don't manage to attract people, it's just a waste of money. So, and we've had quite a few cases of that. It's not, you know, we got the big picture right, but sometimes the small ones wrong. So that's something which I would tell our Ukrainian friends to keep in mind. And finally, I wanted to mention one last project, which is completely different, and which shows that sometimes small is beautiful, which is a project called Las Meninas de Canido. I just have a couple of pictures, which the embassy actually presented here in Kyiv in January in the Port Creative Hub in Podil, which is a very good example of a Ukrainian case where you managed to use old industrial infrastructure for artistic uses. And I mean, the whole case of the riverside by Podil would be an example of an area which would be liable for redevelopment, like maybe the coastal area of Odessa. And this is a very small key initiative which started in one of the suburbs of El Ferrol, which is a big industrial, big 100,000 people, industrial city in the north of Spain linked to shipbuilding, because Spain in the 70s was the third biggest country in shipbuilding in Europe, and it's once again a sector which was very strong on volume and has now changed and is concentrating on high value added, as most of European industry has, and so the employment has sunk, although the quality of the jobs has improved, which is what we're all aiming for. And this also brought with it a whole phase of urban decay in some of the areas, and one of them was Canido. And they are led by some artists. The local people established a festival 10 years ago, 2008, in September, where artists from all over the world come and they paint on empty buildings, they make their sculptures and leave them there. And this has really transformed the whole area. And it's a suburb which had 2,000 inhabitants 10 years ago, now has 8,000. Has managed to have this bohemian touch, restaurants, bars, and it really has. This project has managed to return dignity to a whole area of town, and I think that's also important to keep in mind. You know, you can have these small key projects, which can be very successful. With you don't always need a lot of public funds, and that would be another advice for our Ukrainian friends. You know, that these things are very much possible. And if you're going to use public funds, be careful and use them well. Thank you very much.
Дякую, thank you. У нас вам.
Thank you very much. We have some time, about 10 minutes for you. Maybe you have questions.
Since the most interesting part, this is the Q&A part, you know. So please introduce yourself and address your question to the speaker. My name is Andy. I represent here the city of Dnipro. I work and the Museum of Ukrainian Art and the private gallery art world. My question is addressed to Ms. Zinoviiva. You mentioned that there was a certain mechanism in place with the help of which the local citizens actually had to, to coordinate their ideas of revitalization. At least there was a poll what the local citizens would like to have. So we encountered the problem when the majority do not know what they would like to have at the level of the architecture or the cultural projects, or general issues, and when they do not know what they can be offered, this results in very low quality level, so to say. Maybe you had some kind of advice. How did you do with the experts? In different cities was different story, because individual stores, we have kind of two-stage approach. If we are talking about museums, we communicate with the local residents just to come up with a general concept, their general vision. So what would it's their idea of the would-be museum or the gallery. But since if you're talking about there were different context or their vision, what is good, what is bad, this problem can be result of the level of each individual district or borough or block of houses of the city, and each resident can participate in this kind of competition and make his or her input or contribution, but they have to be supported by a certain number of his or her neighbors while doing that. So you have to establish some kind of coalition, so to say. And if you would like to present your individual vision, it would be a difficult task for you to do that. But if this is kind of the joint idea, or which represents several people, or we are talking about some kind of public vision or cultural vision, whatever, then the resident of the city can contribute to this concept. And then we can select the project for which most of the people or biggest number of the people voted for. You are going to face some difficulties because, based on what I've seen in the city of Kyiv, the people are not get used yet to think together about their common public space. And actually the same problem we can encounter in the residential houses that people live in. But we also had this problem. They thought that since this is somebody else's or common space, nobody should take care of that because nobody is responsible for that, But later people start to understand, you want to change something, you have to start with your own individual house or space, in order to communicate with all your neighbors, whatever, and then you can enlarge or expand this space later on and move ahead, move forward. And there is such an element that it requires a lot of work, a lot of effort to make people to pay attention to this kind of their common space, and so that all the people start to think where they would like to live in, and if they want something very useful and nice for them. This doesn't require a huge amount of money. Sometimes it can be done free of charge. You just have to pull your efforts sometimes, that's it. And we are talking about the museums. We paid attention to the following, that they need to prepare the displays, different exhibitions or displays of the exhibition for individual visitors. I also can say here, they start to think that you yourself have to try to create something for new visitors, So there are a lot of individual museum programs which are meant for the residents of the city, or more specifically for the children of the city. And then we can start, if we are talking about the start of a new education, we can start it from the education related to the modern art. In my opinion, when a person doesn't understand something and nobody tries to teach this person something or try to change his or her point of view, this creates a lot of problem because people just do not know how to treat this or another phenomenon, so to say. And we need to try and find some common approach to individual elements, and this depends only upon ourselves, nobody else. Any other questions, dear colleagues? Maybe not a question, rather kind of the. I would like to echo what has been said, that if you're talking about the Ukrainian experience, we also have some experience of this kind. And since we are talking about the Donbass area, we have some experience accumulated in Donetsk. I don't know how this organization is called, isolation. You heard about that. It would be nice to invite here the representative of this organization for them to share their experience, because they took care of the revitalization of the isolator enterprise in Donetsk, and they actually went through the same. They covered the same paths while coming to this result. So, and maybe we can talk about what happened in Sloviansk. This is an old city and quite a well-known city, but I have a small question anyway. This kind of revitalization and museumification, so to say, of the city, this could be, do you rely upon the local residents only, but you also try to involve the tourists as well? First of all, we mentioned there is kind of two-stage effort. We polled the local residents, but I already mentioned that was a program to create a new industry, because in the past in Odia they had only the textile industry in place, and when this industry actually was on decline, many people lost their jobs. They did not even could imagine where they could find some new jobs over there. You know what to do. So we could hear that up to 1,000 new jobs were created for the people in art galleries within the so-called the art industry, also in tourist industry. And since this kind of industry is not very well developed, it's kind of small-scale industry, it could be even more useful to local people than the big-time industry, you know, because in the past when we had this kind of huge scale, big-time industry, they couldn't imagine how they would live without this industry. But this was kind of the answer to the question what can be done. And my respected colleague from Spain mentioned that there were a lot of opportunities for the small-scale industry, can create more opportunities than the big-time or big-scale industry. Thank you very much. We actually approached the end of our briefing. I would like to remind you that Kateryna Smagliy at the beginning mentioned some of these threats. We still face some threat, but if you're going to have this kind of the future, some kind of revitalization, and when the people can visualize their future, perhaps it depends on on those people to diminish the scope of this kind of common threat, whatever. Maybe it's not only the task to create some kind of nice building or house, but become the center of this kind of revitalization. We are talking about renovation or restoration not only of some regions or the cities or houses or the streets, but also they understand the people that they reside in a nice place and they do not need anything else, that they are happy to live in their own place or space. Thank you very much for your participation in this conference, for your very interesting stories and answers to the questions. Dear friends, our next panel, it's 4:30, presentation of new museum projects. So we have a short pause, a short